I want to tie for you today the pattern that I'm going to be tying Saturday at this coming Saturday at the West Denver Trout Unlimited Tying Clinic. I'm using, I don't know if you've ever seen these hooks before, Saber. They're a pretty nice hook. The thing about them is they're not expensive. And I've used them. This is basically a Tiemco 8089 configuration. The wire is a touch lighter, but I've used them on my flies, never had any issues with them. So I'm going to tie on that hook today. And the tail I'm going to do for you is the tail I've done for a lot of patterns. There we go. Get it clicked in there. Is the tail that I've done on a lot of patterns. So there's nothing real new here. So let's just go ahead and get it. And I'm going to be using a color combination that I like, kind of that olive yellow, sort of froggy looking colors are always really a good color. So that's going to be my tie-in area back here. So I'm just going to add a little bit of Zap-A-Gap right there. Just wet the shank is really all I'm doing. And then I'm going to take my thread, wind it back through that glue, and my tie-in point here, as you can see, let me drop it a little bit. My tie-in point, meaning where the bend of the hook starts, is right straight above the point on this hook. So let me go ahead and let me cut it here. I should grab my other scissors. All right, so I'm going to leave that back. Now, I'm going to start my centering material. I always like to do a centering material, and I'm using two. These are whiting chickaboo. One's yellow, and this one's kind of a golden olive color, and the color combo between the yellow is kind of a nice centering color there. So I'm going to start with the brighter yellow, and I'm just going to pull couple feathers off the center here, and these feathers are very marabou-like. You could actually use marabou in place of this. What I like about these feathers is they taper down. They're not quite as I don't know what you want to say, robust as they taper down to a little smaller thing. Like when I fold it here, you can see what that looks like. And marabou would be a little heavier than this is. So this is just a little bit lighter. So I'm going to cut this here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the front and match it up to the front of my tie-in area. But remember, my thread was behind that. So now I'm just going to get a couple loose wraps and then pull that right down in there and come back to my tie-in point. There's my tie-in point. So now I can come forward. And so now I've kind of got this tied in there, and I've kind of defined the tie-in area for my tail. What I'm going to do, the next thing I'm going to add is some Larva Lace angel hair. This is a really fine material. A lot of the lakes I fish are clear water lakes, so I don't want to over flash this. So I'm just going to take a few of these here and just kind of work them together, and then come in here, fold them over the thread. So I'm going to come up, I drop it right there at the beginning of the tie-in area. Right at the beginning of the tie-in area, give a couple wraps. Then I'm going to take it and I'm going to spread it around that yellow. Kind of hold it around the yellow while I wrap back on it. And then I'll just come in here and clip it in the back and kind of spread it around there. That'll just give me a little bit of flesh. The other thing I'm going to do right now, I think, is come and I'm going to put a couple wraps right under the tail just to kind of set it up in the air a little bit. Now I'm going to come in with my more golden olive color, which will be a nice color combination here. And the reason I do this centering material, and I've done this before, this is not new. for you if you've watched some of my previous videos. The reason I do the center material is one, it adds a little texture and movement to the fly, which is something we want. And two, it helps to keep the little legs or the tail feathers I put on, it's going to help to keep those separated. Okay, so now I take these two feathers and I match up the tips of them. Put it down here on my base, pull them together so you can see, here they are. So now I'll just kind of work them together, kind of look at the tips. And I want to get a bundle that's the same length as that bundle, so that's about right there. So I'll just change hands. Again, I clip this, take my thread more to the back of the tie-in area, and then just wrap through. So right there's the, let's back up, there we go, that's probably about right. Then come forward and then walk that thread forward just a little bit. I'm at the back of the tie-in area back there. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a couple of whiting American hen capes, grizzly dyed, one dyed olive, one dyed yellow, and I'm going to make this so that my outside feather is olive and my inside feathers are yellow. So I've got some feathers I already picked out here. So let me grab these guys. And what I do is I just match up the tips. You can do this on the curve of your leg too, kind of lay the feathers in the curve of your leg. That works well. So put that one in there. Just make sure my tips are lined up. Then I'm going to make sure my stems are lined up too. Okay. If we get the stems, all three stems lined up so they're not split apart, that will help hold this whole leg clump together as a group. Adjust the length just a little bit. And then I want a tail that's going to be about twice as long. So that pretty much fits the bill. And it's coming just past the centering, those chickaboo feathers I put in as a centering material. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in. So here's what you want to do. You want to come and get a couple loose wraps, pull it tight, and get the front of it first. Then once you've got the front of it, hold the three feathers together and then come back and walk your thread back. That'll help keep those stems together, and it'll help to mount those feathers on there so they're all right side by side. Let's clip that. Now I'll do my other side, my near side here. So again, I'm curved down, so this is going to go out. So I put the olive on the outside, and then the yellow goes on the inside because that's more my interior color. A little bit lighter color. That's a pretty standard way I do the feathers. I always probably have the more dominant dark color on the outside, the lighter feather on the inside. Match the stems up, marry them all together here. Adjust my length just a little bit. Okay. Look at that. It's a little bit off. Let's try to do that one more time. So take my olive, take my yellow, match up the tips. Take my other yellow one, match up the tips. Keep the stems together. There we go. That looks pretty good. So now I'll come in here. Now all I do is I take it and I match up the length of the other tail. I kind of put the tips together so they're right side by side. I push the feather forward to the front, let go of it. Don't let my back and forth measurement change. Get that measured, come forward. Again, a couple loose wraps, pull it tight, get the front of it, and then kind of hold the back and come back and make sure we're back at that tie-in area. And then I come forward a little bit to kind of reestablish my area in the back. Okay, so now the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to just use some Whiting American Rooster. Okay, the rooster feathers tend to be less webby, so they make a nice hackle collar. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a couple, and I'm going to kind of yellow is going to be my more predominant color, so I'm going to pick 2 yellow feathers here. And then I'll pick 1 olive feather to go on this. There we go, that looks like a pretty good one. As far as barbule length goes, your barbule length can be anywhere from the hook gape distance to maybe a hook gape and a quarter. You don't want to get it maybe too big. And you could actually maybe be down to a more like 3/4 of a hook gape if you want, sort of anywhere in there. It's not a precise thing. It's kind of filler in there, kind of helps the transition between the deer hair body and this tail or legs back here. So I'm just kind of filling in. So now what I'm going to do is, as I put my feathers together, I'm going to come and I'm going to clip them. Then I'm going to pull my feathers out a little bit like that. And I come in and I clip the sides right there. And what that does is it creates a little brush on the stem of the feather. And now I'm going to put the curve towards me. Okay, so the curve is coming towards me, the concave side of it. That way it'll be dry fly style. I don't think it matters. If you want to mount it the other way, you can mount it the other way and do it wet fly style. Okay, and then come forward. Now remember, before we talked about the fact that we want to keep this little tuft in the front. We don't want to run that thread all the way across and have it slope off the front edge of this. Now I'm going to take a little of my Dave's Flexament and drop it in here on these thread wraps. So I'm just going to take a little. Remember, this is just goop, thinned out goop. You thin it with toluene. Works real well. So I'm just dropping it on those thread wraps. That'll just help soak down through there, and it will just make the fly a little bit more durable. So now I'm going to come and I'm going to wrap each of these feathers. I do them individually. You could do them as a group, I suppose. I tend not to. Now, as you come in, be conscious of keeping the thread kind of moving to the back. You want to try to not let it slip off the front, because then materials will start sloping off. Your hackle will start sliding down the front, and we want to keep this hackle collar right here. And we want to preserve as much of the hook shank for the deer hair as we possibly can. So we're working to keep this hackle back up in this tie down area. And 2 wraps of thread is more than enough. Remember, you got the glue in there too. That's going to, once it cures, it's going to help to hold all that in place. And I'll wrap my 3rd hackle through here. So I've got a nice robust hackle collar here that'll really fill in nicely behind the deer hair head. Okay, there we go. Now I'll rotate my vise a little bit. Then I'll come in, see if I can grab this. There we go. Kind of caught the ends of those stems a little bit. So I'm just kind of putting a few wraps there right at the front of this. Then I'll just come in and put a whip finish on it. Remember, I'll be coming back when I do my deer hair work. I got my tail in here. Let's make sure I get it locked into my little grooves here so it won't move around. There we go. Yeah, now it's in there nice and tight. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sweep the hackle collar back and create my little thread band here. And then we'll just whip finish it. That'll just, as I've done on other patterns, that'll just get it out of the way. So now that's put away there. So now let's go ahead and get my gel spun thread started here. So I'm going to wet the back of the shank there with some Zap-A-Gap. And for this one, I'm using a GSP 130. It's a little hard to find. You could go 150, like a Vivas or a UTC 150 would work great. So I'm going to do a thread base. All right. So now I'm going to start here, and I'm going to put yellow on the bottom, and it's going to be kind of an olive colored top. So you see how I'm going to do the order here for the flies. So let's come in and get a bunch of yellow, comb it out. And as with all my flies, or all these bass bug type flies, this is probably the one technique you need to learn. And again, it's, you know, you see me do it, but the thread tension is the key right there, where it's just wanting to start to flare. You can see that hair just wanting to start to flare. That's where you want it. If you got it there, then you just bring this third wrap around and use it to push the bunch to the bottom, and it doesn't go anywhere. It stays there on the bottom. Then you can hold it and flare it in place. So you can see that all that got flared right in the bottom. You can see the hook shank there. Okay. So now I'm going to come and get my light olive here. And I'm going to stack this because I am using the tips for a collar. So I'm going to go ahead and stack that bunch and even up the hair tips. So trim these butts up so they're a little neater. Lay it in here so it comes back probably to about the bend of the hook. Come in, 2 wraps. Make sure you hold it here on top and flare it in place. Then I'm going to come and get a little bit of black. And we'll comb out that under fur. Stack it. Trim the butts up a little bit. So now I just match up these tips to the pale olive or the light olive ones I put in there. 2 wraps. And remember, all your wraps need to go through the same plane. Don't move the wraps forward or backward. And now flare it in place. Now I'm going to come and get my dark olive color here. I'm going to make a little dark olive spot on the top of this fly. So again, I'm just putting it in my hair stacker here, my anadromous hair stacker. You know, it's a nice big hair stacker. It does a great job stacking these big bunches of hair. So now I'm going to put it right in that space there with the black. And make sure the black is encompassed around it. Now again, 2 wraps. Work it up through the hair. Try to get it right in the same spot you said those last 2 wraps. Now this one, I'm going to put my fingers on each side and pinch it and hold it right in place on top there like that. Now I'll come back and push all this back, separate the olive and the yellow. Bring my thread forward, put a couple half hitches in there. And then I'll come in with my hair packing tool. I'm not going to get a lot of movement on it because it's already up against the tail. Now I'll come forward, bring it out a little bit. And that way you don't tangle the hair behind it. Plus then we can push that whole bunch back, so we'll go back to the back there. So now same process for the bottom. I'm going to just take this yellow hair, turn top and bottom. Now, I don't need the tips now because this part I'm not using for a collar. So I'm going to come in here, get 2 wraps, get that right, that tension proper, get it around to the bottom, and flare it in place. I'm going to add a little of my fly right glue here just to make the pattern a little tougher. And now this part out here is going to be my diving lip. So I'm not going to put any spots and stuff. That's the only spot I'm going to put on the fly. So let me come and get some of this pale olive. Comb it out. Trim the butts and the tips out of it. Okay, so now lay it down in here. Come in and get your wraps. 2 wraps. And then hold it on top and flare it right down in place. Now, I'm going to make a space right on top there, and I'm going to come because I want some good hair density there, so I need to add a little more hair on top. So, come in here. I'll come and put my space there, and come and flare that right there. Now I'll just push back on that, come out here, pull back on it, get my tension again, bring my thread up under tension, put it there in front, come in and get a couple half hitches in front, and then get my packing tool. And I remember the packing tool is what's pushing the knots that I put in there. It's not pushing the hair, it's pushing the knots and the thread back. So I give it a good pack. You can see all that hair spring forward. That's because it pushed the knot back. It didn't push the hair back. So now I'll come in here and we'll just repeat that process. Get some yellow and put it on the bottom. Come and catch the hook shank. Second wrap, so I'm right there at that tension. I roll that bunch to the bottom and I flare it right on the bottom. Add a little more glue here. Come in here and get my light olive. Comb it out. Trim out my butts and my tips. Lay them in here. Come and get my 2 thread wraps through there. Now I'm just going to hold it in place and flare it. Then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a little bit more on top just like I did before. Comb it out, lay it in here, and then hold it right in place. Now I'll push that back in there, and then come in here and get my, let's try to get a little pack on that because I'm starting to crowd the eye a little bit. Let's push that back. There we go. That's good. So now bring the thread out and get a wrap right out there on the hook shank. Now I can come back in and get a couple knots around that eye. And then tighten up a little bit. Now when I come and pack, that'll stay in place a little better. There we go. Yeah, and I got about the right amount for a little thread head there when I finish out. So come in here with my Zap-A-Gap. And I'm going to apply it, remember, apply it to the thread, not to the hook itself. And then I'll wrap that in there. Try to avoid catching any hair. If you kind of work it in and work it slow, you can kind of get around the hair on it. Might have a few hairs with a little glue. That's not going to hurt anything. Okay, one more. Kind of a double half hitch in there. I can come in and cut my thread. Come in and get another little pack there. Now my spot is on top. Let me comb through. So what I do is I just inspect it. You can see that spot I put in there is up on top. You know, I kind of look and make sure it's kind of centered there. I can move that around a little bit if I need to. And I'm just kind of looking at this whole pattern. So there you go. There's the deer hair work on it. So now to begin my trimming process, what I've done is I've taken a circle template and I've made a couple circles and I cut them out. So I cut a few of these out ahead of time. So here's one I cut out earlier. So I'm going to take that and place it over the top. So you can see what it does is it creates a little temple there. And you can see I have a hole up on top. That's because I used it before. I just punched a new hole so to hold a little tighter. So now I'm going to put it in here. And I'm going to use that as my guide. And I'm going to come in here with my razor blade holder, my razor blade, and I'm going to work my way back. Just kind of around that template. Kind of getting back to that spot now. On the bottom, I'm going to go all the way through. Kind of come all the way through there. And then just kind of work up to that spot. I'm going to come in and do some closer work with a blade after, but this is kind of getting me my rough shape here. Okay, I think I'm pretty close. So what I've got now is I've just got this nice cylinder, kind of cylinder shape here. So what I'm going to do next is I'll use my steamer. So take a look. I'm not going to put the steamer in the camera. You can kind of see the hair here. It's kind of starting to pop out a little bit. It's not quite there yet. So as soon as my steamer's hot here, I'm going to go over and steam this fly. And that'll make all this hair really expand out. So you can kind of hear it going now. Okay. So now you can see that hair really is out in the front. You see how it's really coming out front. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to go around here and I'm going to kind of clean that front edge up. I'm just going to kind of create a flat surface here. If I were doing a popper, this would end up staying flat like this. Come in and get these extra little hairs out of there. Another thing I noticed is, okay, right there, you can see I got some folded over. My thread caught some hair there and folded it over. So what I'm going to do, you'd like not to have that happen because it you know, that piece of the hair, that little part of the head, the hair is not quite as dense, but you just come in and pick it out. And it happens. I imagine it happens to just, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's some tires out there that never happens to. I kind of doubt it. But that's why moving the forward, doing this bunch and then pushing it back with the packing tool helps because you don't quite capture that hair. But now I've got it all picked out pretty straight. So I'm not in too bad a shape here. So now I'm going to flip it over. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my razor blade. So I'm going to start by coming in and flattening this, and I'm going to bend it a little back to help open up the hook shank, because I do want to catch fish on this. So I'm just going to come back and kind of help open that hook shank up. And then I'm going to flip it over here, and I'm going to flatten the top because it's pretty big right now, so I'm going to flatten the top a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to that spot, but I stop when I see the tips. When I see the tips, that's where I stop. I'm going to do the same thing on the side here. Come back and just kind of clean that up a little bit, because this is still pretty big. And I realize I'm losing my cylinder shape. That's okay. The cylinder shape is where I kind of got started with it. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to come back and I'm going to shape it around a little. We'll kind of put the shape back in it. And I'm just rounding those edges off, coming back to that cylinder shape. And I'm paying attention to this back. I don't want to lose my tips. My tips are my collar back there. So now I'm going to do the same here. I'm just going to come around and round these edges up. You can see I'm not, I'm doing very small cuts. I'm not doing big, deep cuts into this hair. It's almost more like sanding it off than it is cutting it off. And now I'm just going to look at it head on here. It's pretty symmetrical. I'm doing pretty good, I think. I'm pretty pleased with what I see. But it's still pretty big. I think I can take it down just a little bit more on each side. We'll just, not a lot, but just a little bit here. And then kind of come back in again, and we'll come around the corners and kind of restore that cylindrical shape to it. And that's not looking too bad. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin on the bottom, and I'm going to put a taper on it. So I put a tapering cut on the bottom. I'm going to kind of taper that out. Then I'm going to do the same on each side. I'm going to put a little angle cut on each side, like that. Now you can see I've got some little edges here and here. I'm going to come and take those out and kind of make that a nice smooth curve going around the bottom, kind of a nice curve back into the fly. And I'm going to extend that taper back a little bit further, and then come in and so I've got not a bad taper going on each side. Sorry, my clocks are going off here. So now, if you look at it here, you can see I've got a taper going on each side, and I got the taper going on the bottom. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here parallel to the hook eye, Okay, so I'm looking at the hook eye parallel and I'm going to create a cut. So I'm going to start here and I'm just going to saw back a little bit till I get a nice established lip started there. And that's probably about as far back as I need to go. And now I'm going to taper these edges around a little more. I want to keep them symmetrical. And we'll just curve this bottom a little bit more. So I'll come in here and I see where my folded over hair is at. I got a few more folds in there, so let's go and pick those out, make sure I get all those out of there. Like I said, I'd rather this not happen, but it happens. Now, if this were going to be a fly I was going to put in a display or something, this might not be okay, but for a fishing fly, it doesn't matter. There we go. I think I got most of those hairs pulled up. So now let me clip those out of there. So now let me look at it again. Okay, I got a little bit of a high spot on this side, so let me come around here and turn that back a little bit and then just kind of smooth out the bottom here. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and cut my thread band and release my hackle. Pull that red thread band out of there. Now what I'm going to do, and you know, the steaming thing you don't need to do. I mean, the steaming thing only is for how the fly looks, you know, when you first tie it. But obviously, when the fly hits the water, it's going to do its thing. I mean, the steaming has no impact on it. The materials will all move around, soak up water, and do what they're going to do. But if you want a nice looking finished fly, you know, steaming helps, and it does help, I think, a little bit with the trimming because it does push the hair out. So I think I'm gonna come along in here and get these sides a little bit more parallel. They're close, but they're just not quite there. Okay, and kind of round out this bottom a little bit more. And then I'm going to come and just do a little bit deeper cut. And you got to be careful doing this part because I've gotten in deep enough before where I've hit my thread and then suddenly everything flies apart. So I want to be careful with that. So there's the head. You can kind of see the head here. Now I can come in and do a little side to side, but do a little. Now let's not do that right now. Let's just come in and let's put a thread head on it. Okay, use my whip finisher. We'll whip finish it. Get it in there, there we go. This will just add a little pop of color in the front, plus it gets in there and covers up those UTC thread wraps. So now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put a little slot in it. Just go each way with it. There we are. Now this part you don't have to do. This is one of the things that Tim England did do on his patterns, is he put a little bit of a little trough up in there that funneled the water up to the thing, but it's not anything you need to do or have to do. Okay, so there it is. The one thing I will do to it, the original pattern doesn't have this, so I see some. Let me take some of these butts out of here. There we are. The original pattern doesn't have this, but I am going to go ahead. I'm going to put some legs in it. You can put legs in it, or you don't have to put legs in it. It doesn't really matter. You know, I'm a big believer in getting your bass flies to have a lot of movement in the water, and so, but I'm not going to put eyes in this one. That's one thing I won't do. I don't. It does really. A lot of our bass bugs don't need eyes. We put them in because they look great, but I'm not going to bother putting eyes in this one. But I think I will put legs in it because the legs will help for the action. So this is just some Montana fly centipede legs, medium centipede legs. It's a solid olive and a solid yellow, and they're pretty long. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to cut them like that, and then we'll thread them through. So let me even up the ends here. Put them through my needle. And then I'm going to thread them through right where that spot is at. And I want to go, remember, go above the hook shank. Get above the hook shank with your needle. Bring them through. So we'll pull them through here. And then we're going to pull down on them. And that'll help to wedge them down into the hair. And then I'm going to go take a little of my thin goop, my Dave's Flexament. There we are. So now let me just put a little of that glue on the legs here. And then when I pull them through, at first the glue acts like a lubricant. It'll help kind of slide the legs down in there. But then when you let them sit, of course, and it cures, it'll hold them in there fairly solid. So now I'll just come down, and I'll come down, even them up, so they come back. And then the last thing I'm going to do is take those thread wraps I put in there and really soak them good with some Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails. And then I'll take a feather and pull it through. And there you have it. Ty's Deciever. This is really close to a Lucky Wiggler too. Stewart's Lucky Wiggler pattern. The Deciever definitely, I think, at least in my reading, definitely preceded the Lucky Wiggler, but I don't know for sure. It's hard to know when guys actually tie a fly for the first time. But anyway, there you have it. It's a great diving pattern. What's nice about it is the hair underneath will soak up water so it lands upright every time. You can accentuate the dive with fishing it off like a little Scientific Angler's 5-foot sink tip. And so there's a lot of ways to fish it. So there's the fly, and hope you enjoyed it.